Hello everyone, my name is Erin James, and this is a review of the film Wakanda Forever, or Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which I will be referring to as just Wakanda Forever. It is directed by Ryan Coogler, the screenplay is by Ryan Coogler and I believe Joe Robert Cole, who is helping with producing Class of '09, a Disney FX show, which I was an extra on, pretty cool, and also starring Brian Tyree Henry, who I'm a fan of. That's not important, but just wanted to throw that in. Ryan Coogler is 4 for 4 for me when it comes to his films. Fruitvale Station, Creed, Black Panther, and now Wakanda Forever. The film stars Angela Bassett, Letitia Wright, Lupita Nyong'o, Winston Duke, Denai Guerrera, Michaela Cole, Dominique Thorne, Martin Freeman, Tina Huerta, Francesca Kasumba. And before I really get into the film, I want to speak on Black Panther 2018 and how it had one of the lowest budgets, and I have my theories of why. I really believe that it was because Disney, the execs, did not believe it would reach the success that it did for reasons of who was in front and behind the camera. And they probably were presented with certain data that proved or showed them that they could have doubts as to who would show up and how much money they'd make from it. Of course, this film, Black Panther, the 2018 one, was kind of mostly just a setup of a battleground for Infinity War. It showed how important it was to have representation, how much it means to people, and we later saw that with Shang-Chi and Miss Marvel. Even though not many people showed up for Miss Marvel, it was definitely important to see that as well. So the synopsis for Wakanda Forever is that Wakanda is mourning its king. At the same time, it has developed certain relationships, whether good or bad, with the world, and during this time, comes into contact with another kingdom or empire that is almost just as advanced and also very powerful and does what it can to defend and protect its own. So the antagonist for this movie is Namor. How I was introduced to Namor was through the comic books, and the story that I know is, he's part of Atlantis, which in this case, for this film, it was not Atlantis. Also, from what I can remember, he is one of the first mutants, if not the first mutants. He is one of the first superheroes in the Marvel Universe presented. He's part Atlantean, part mutant in the comics, at least. And just has a distaste for land dwellers, particularly the white man, who does what he can to colonize and take over as much as he can. The Atlanteans and the Wakandans in the comics, that's why I'm saying Atlanteans, cross paths many times. Namor and the Black Panther fight continuously in many issues, but then eventually many times also team up and ally to fight against threats to their empire and to their kingdom. My first assumption going into this film is that it's going to be two communities, very similar, trying to protect their heritage, their culture, their beliefs, their faith, and their people, as well as their resources from being taken, colonized, or taken advantage of, or exploited by outside forces. And what ends up happening is that the Talocan and Namor, he sees it as a threat of the world and and has an issue with Wakandans because he sees them as a threat because they're also very advanced, and sees this as an advantage or a perfect opportunity because the Black Panther is not there and they have no dedicated ruler, right? There's no king or queen to really lead the charge as far as combat. Also, I had the idea that they were going to be pitted against each other because of outside forces, when in reality they recognize that they are very similar. They have a lot of similarities, and they both care very much about their people, the Black Panther and Namor. And what this leads to them allying, or more so just parting ways and choosing to have peace with one another. In the comics, we kind of see this a few times, showing how similar they are and that they're both trying to maintain, again, their history. And with this kind of shift, in a way, race bending of Namor to be Mayan descent and have that Mexican culture, Central American culture ingrained in it, and kind of, I guess, mostly just the representation of indigenous people in Americas. I saw it as similar to the Wakandans being very much indigenous to their community and never having been colonized, that they were going to see similarities and eventually they would ally. But until then, they were going to have misunderstandings. Similar to the comics, I saw this as Namor being introduced as a potential villain, but in reality, eventually becoming more so an anti-hero. Now, going into this movie, I saw, the budget was obviously increased because Disney learned. And it just shows how much Disney really screwed over so many of its actors of color. Kelly Marie Tran, John Boyega, and Lupita Nyong'o, coincidentally all in the same franchise. Now, onto the film. First, this movie is very long, over 2.5 hours. I think 2 hours and 40 some minutes. Ryan Coogler was dealt a very difficult hand, having finished the script prior to the passing of Chadwick Boseman, and then after the tragic passing, having to rewrite the script, prepare for shooting, production. My goodness, what am I coming down with? Also, the cast dealing with that passing and having to present themselves in this film, right? And feeling that loss and feeling that absence. Ryan Coogler integrated the passing or death of Black Panther or King T'Challa. And I'm sure that the actors and the rest of the cast and crew kind of were able to bring in a lot of their actual feelings into the creation of this film, which led to a lot more depth and feeling that emotion and believing that these, although they're acting, they are definitely pulling a lot of that real pain and sadness into this film with a lot of the scenes. I believe the original story was that there was a lot of bad blood between the royal families, and it's what led to not the Wakandans, Namor and his the Italocan to attack and see that as an opportunity to attack. And I would have still been interested in reading that, at least in a book or reading that telling. And there are scenes where you can tell that, okay, this is part of the story. And there are scenes that you could tell were just added after the passing. And not to say that they were bad, but you could just tell. You could kind of tell. I went to go see the movie twice, opening night and then the following day. And so I was able to more so see what scenes were added and kind of tell. Now, onto the acting. Angela Bassett should at least get a nomination. She did fantastic in this. I mean, as expected, I expected Angela Bassett to be part of the many people to help push this and carry this even after the passing of Chadwick Boseman. She did wonderful. Winston Duke, Lupita Nyong'o, great as expected. I've loved them in other things that they've been in. I love them in the prior Black Panther film. They do not get enough screen time, in my opinion. I felt that Winston's character, M'Baku, was kind of put into the sidelines. Nakia, played by Lupita, maybe there was more for her in the original script, but it felt like they kind of did the same with her, put her in the sidelines. I also understand that these actors kind of blew up a lot more, got a lot bigger after the first film, and they may have been busy. However, still, which reminds me of Daniel Kaluuya. Daniel Kaluuya's character, he was not in this film because of scheduling conflicts. He was shooting for Nope, so he couldn't be in this. And so, but his absence didn't stand out too much except when he was mentioned. Tina Corta Mejia, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. He was amazing. Him as Namor, I mean, I was already a fan of Namor from the start. I love the dynamic between Namor and Black Panther in the comic books. I love the story. I loved hearing that Ryan Coogler was going to be working on him, and when hearing that he was also going to make him a representation of the kind of Latin America, indigenous people in Central America, I was excited. Representation. I am Black and Mexican, so this film was like great. Tina Huerta Mejia was phenomenal. The execution of Namor and how he was presented, it was menacing, and it felt like he wasn't playing games. Now, Talecan, I heard that they shot a lot of those scenes were just shot underwater. They just had people swimming in a pool, and as much as I like that kind of practical filming, it might have helped to shoot some special effects more so, because it seemed a bit inconvenient to swim, because you could tell a lot of the people that were swimming weren't great swimmers, and so it looked like they were struggling to get from one place to the next, and I would kind of be frustrated with how patient you'd have to be to wait for someone to get to you. It just seemed impractical, and I think they could have followed something similar to Aquaman or even Avatar with how people interact underwater. Michaela Cole and Dominique Thorne did not have too much shine. Michaela Cole was definitely more of a background character, but I loved seeing her. Dominique Thorne, I was a fan with back in. I became a fan when I saw her in Judas and the Black Messiah with Lakeith Stanfield and Daniel Kaluuya. So I was excited when it was announced she was going to be Ironheart, and then I found out she was going to be in this film. And I was like, great, let's see it. She stood out in the scenes that she was in. She was funny. She helped balance, especially because there was a lot of mourning and sadness in this film. So she helped balance that out, and a lot of seriousness. And she kind of brought in that comedic element, and I really appreciate that. Which I want to say, I'm glad that a lot of the characters in the Black Panther world aren't all just quippers. Ryan Coogler did well not to follow the Marvel BS of making every character a jokester, but having comedic elements within it, but they feel authentic and they feel natural and genuine, and they don't make everyone a comedian. Denai Guerrera, I like her a lot. And Okoye, her as Okoye, I like her action scenes. She shined in her action scenes, and it shows how important it was to have her in Infinity War and Endgame, even though, again, Infinity War and Endgame, Disney didn't think that people would care so much about Black Panther, that no one would show up for Black Panther, and it shows with the minimal time that they get in those films. And I'm sure if they would have went back, they would have gave more time to them. Either way, Denai Guerrera, loved her in her action scenes. I kind of felt, I'll get to that when I start speaking spoilers. Now, Letitia Wright, the one who is expected to carry this after Chadwick Boseman's passing, who was not prepared for this, who probably expected just to be a side character in a supporting role, just like in the previous film, who then has to not only take the mantle as the Black Panther with Shuri, but also as the lead of this film, and having to carry that weight. And it's one thing to just be pushed into a lead role, but then having to fulfill these expectations and deal with this loss, this grief. I will say that this film has a lot of layers to what it's supposed to symbolize, what it's supposed to mean, what it's being done for, what it's being filmed for. And Letitia Wright does great at executing that emotion. Now, as a Black Panther, I still need to see her some more to really believe in that and fall into that belief, into that imagination of her being a Black Panther, because maybe because I'm used to seeing Chadwick Boseman, maybe because her physique, that was one thing that stood out, is her physique. She is pretty thin, right? She's pretty skinny and shorter. And so it's just having to get used to that. Now, there is a lot better action. The choreography's better. The effects are a bit better. There are a couple scenes where you could tell, okay, this is definitely green screen, right? A good green screen, but it was, you could tell. Better choreography. Again, Denai Guerrera's Okoye, those scenes probably were the best, or my favorite action scenes throughout the film. There is one scene that you see in the trailer when the Talocan attack Wakanda, and that scene was my favorite. It was intense. I felt that there was a lot at stake, and that's one thing Ryan Coogler did very well in this film, is It feels like things are actually at stake. Feels like things can actually be lost. People can actually die. Feels like there was no remorse. It feels that the villain was very serious and he was not going to yield for nothing. And he had faith and trust in very few people, only his people. And Ryan Coogler made sure not to fall into the trope of other villains of making it a bad villain, but also making a villain that's not really harming people. And we see that in a lot of films like this where they don't really hurt the person. Like if Namor was given the opportunity, he will take your life. Fantastic soundtrack. I listened to the soundtrack quite a few times. I'm thinking about making a review of it, but I enjoyed it. Enjoyed the music. I heard the soundtrack a few times prior to seeing the film. So when I watched the film and I heard some tracks, I enjoyed that. Very good. Rihanna's single "Lift Me Up." It's good for the moment, and it's a good contrast from SZA and Kendrick's "All of the Stars" in the first film. Now I do have some things that are kind of negative. First off, once the emotions dwindle and the excitement fades, you start seeing the flaws and you start seeing some issues, and you see that it's a superhero movie. Now, as far as what it means to you emotionally, how much it means to me, it's one of the best superhero films. It's one of my favorite superhero films. I really enjoy it. I think it's definitely one of the best films of the year. Definitely a big blockbuster and something I'll be watching again. But it is long. Again, it is long, and that is something that comes to mind while you're watching it. And when I watched it a second time, I saw it with two people, and even they said after the film, they said, "Man, this movie was really long." Maybe 10 minutes could be cut off. I think some dialogue or some moments could be moved around, and 10 to 15 minutes could be shaved off, and it would still be a good film. I was more into Tinoch's Namor and Talocan than I was into Denai Guerrera's Okoye and Dominic Thorne's Riri Williams character. Although I feel like that was necessary to introduce them for the story that they were trying to do, it felt like there was a bit more of Namor I was more interested in and I wanted to know more about, especially Talocan. Felt Talocan was kind of here it is, it exists, now let's move on. So the world building of Talocan was not great. It was not the best, and it could have been done better. And again, the CGI or how they presented Talocan, it felt like this feels difficult to live in. Although it'd be great to be away from war, disease, violence, any fear of the outside world, it'd be still difficult to live in this. But I'd prefer this over what I just listed. And I'm wondering if a little bit of that was cut. You know, Namor's story was cut for the mourning, right? And for Shuri to get the mantle, to be carrying the mantle and dealing with that loss. Because the focus of the mourning of T'Challa was Shuri, you know, dealing with that loss and battling between her logical, technological, book smarts and what people believe in and tradition and the ancestors, and having that battle of what do I believe in and what can I prove. I maybe set too high expectations for this film because of the director, the actors, the film, what it's about, but it's still fun, exciting, funny, entertaining. Again, a blockbuster. Again, something I will go back watching. But I need to sit back and remember it's a Marvel superhero film, and there are still things that Disney will not allow anyone to do and may expect them to add in. I do appreciate that this film is a direct sequel to Black Panther, so you don't need to go and watch any other MCU movies. Now, there is one word that is mentioned that maybe you'd have to know about, which is Thanos. He's mentioned once, and his name is mentioned only once, and that is it. But other than that, I mean, you could replace that with anything, with some other catastrophic or world event that happened, or that maybe we didn't even see on screen, and it would still make sense. The story's good, and I like that about the first Black Panther, that you could watch that movie and not really follow anything prior or after, and you'd be set. There is a post-credit scene in the first Black Panther that kind of ties it into the MCU, but you wouldn't have to watch that and you'd be fine. Now for the spoilers. Again, the movie's pretty long. Again, they added the funeral in the beginning for both T'Challa in a way, also a homegoing for Chadwick Boseman, and saying this is for you, right? This is dedicated to you, and that was very touching, very heartfelt. I wore white to both premieres. I was ready. Now this film has a lot of layers to it. Of course, it's dedicated to Chadwick Boseman. It deals with the loss and mourning of its king, as well, and it has the surface level of there's now that the king is gone, now that the Black Panther is gone, we have a threat that may be the greatest threat on Earth, for us, and we are dealing with it just because we choose not to ally with them. The Talocan also use vibranium. They also have vibranium because a meteor, of course, in the first film, a meteor full of vibranium fell into a part of Africa, which ended up becoming Wakanda. But there is apparently a second meteor that fell into the ocean, Atlantic Ocean specifically, and that is what led to Talocan and them creating an advanced society as well, except they chose to go into hiding and not really come out and share their resources or even present their existence. People do not even know that they exist outside of Wakanda by the end of this film. Another underlying theme is dealing with loss. Shuri had already lost her father prior. She loses her brother in the beginning, T'Challa, and then in the middle of the film, she loses her mother. And dealing with that grief and processing all the emotions that come with loss. And in this case, not only did she lose her brother to something she couldn't necessarily cure him from, it was a mysterious disease, which I felt tied well into how Chadwick Boseman actually passed with cancer. And then her mother, who drowned, but her life was taken from her by Namor. And her dealing with the loss of anger, frustration, revenge, sadness, grief, and not knowing, feeling as if no one else knows her the way that her family did. And will she close off her heart to the world and block herself out and allow this revenge to consume her? Or will she allow herself to grieve in a healthy way and move on? And I really like the underlying theme because in the end, that's what the story is about, is how do you deal with grief and what are you going to do to deal with the sadness and loss, and how will you move on in life? And it is important to move on in life and not allow this to hold you back from anything else, because the people that passed would want you to move on. So I really enjoyed that. I really appreciated that. And it hits because I'm sure Letitia Wright was really dealing with that pain of Chadwick leaving and then having to deal with all this is put on my shoulders and I'm going to have to present this in a authentic way and also make something that people will connect with and people will like. Now Nakia, played by Lupita Nyong'o, her character married to T'Challa. She's living in Haiti and is in a way in hiding, in a way just trying to help a part of the world, people that have been oppressed in the past. And I felt that was such a great messaging, and this is where a lot of other messaging comes in, because so at the UN meeting, when the countries are expressing concerns about how Wakanda could be a threat to the world because they have the strongest metal that's not detected by metal detectors, that can create super advanced weapons of mass destruction. France is one of those countries that presents this concern, they claim. At the same time, the Queen, she presents, played by Angela Bassett, again, fantastic acting. She talks about how the French attempted to steal vibranium from one of their outposts, one of the Wakandan outposts. And she presents the prisoners to her and the representative of France. And the representative, she's quiet after that. Also, Haiti, in the past, if you do not know, was colonized by French invaders. The France had taken over. And this kind of, I'll get to the mid-credit scene later. So Nakia, she's working there, trying to help people build schools, help them how to rely on themselves, and develop their own resources, use what they have to prosper. And I felt that was beautiful to see and beautiful to get that message across to people. Then you have the Talocan, who that you could kind of tie into the idea, the Mayans kind of disappeared out of nowhere. No one knows where they went, as far as we know. There's like no evidence, showing where they had gone to. And this kind of ties in, you could tie this into the mythology that maybe they went into the ocean and they are the ones, this mythological empire known as Atlantis could be the Mayans' empire. I like that idea. I like that approach, that execution. They speak. In the soundtrack, there's a song that is sung in Mayan. I don't know if they were speaking Mayan in the film. I did not look it up. Namor, his action scenes were fantastic. I like the Koyes, but when Namor is flying through the air, it felt menacing. Just when he was moving so fast, dodging those shots and bullets, I was sitting there like, oh my gosh. And he was just taking out planes. He didn't care if you died, if you lived. He's like, I'm going to just take this down. Hopefully you die so I can move on to the next thing. He kills the queen of Wakanda on screen. We see it in Wakanda. That was an intense scene. He even waited to confirm that she was passed and pointed at Shuri. He pointed at Shuri and said, "You are queen now." And then he just flies off. And that was intense. And honestly, I thought he was going to die, which I'm glad they didn't kill him, especially because of the character he is, how important he is to the Marvel Universe, especially in the beginning. But my goodness. Again, it felt, again, it was shot in swimming pools, so a lot of the underwater scenes, you could tell, I was like, you're not really moving as fast as I would think you'd be moving in the water. M'Baku, played by Winston Duke, his character stood out. I think a lot of his presence is not just his stature, but also he's pretty much, a lot of times he's the only male on screen. And Winston Duke in general did such a good performance in the prior film and in the film Us, that now it's like he's a star, right? He's a star, at least to us, right? Danai Gurira's Okoye, her scene on the bridge at the river, beautiful. I did not care for her scene in the midnight angel armor suit. It looked hideous, and Okoye even said it looks hideous, and I think they were trying to joke about it because it looks bad. It looks horrible. I did not like it. It felt too Iron Man-y, and if we're giving everyone Iron Man suits, then how much will Ironheart mean to us if anyone can get a suit that's very similar to that? And so I hope they kind of pull back on that, because Ironheart, just like Iron Man was supposed to be Iron Man, like no one else should have too similar of technology. I feel Ironheart should be the same way. Ironheart's supposed to be the next Iron Man in a sense. And so let's be careful with what we do with those suits. Anyway, the Midnight Angel armor, cool action scene that they had, but it was whatever. Now, Dominique Thorne's Riri Williams. I love how they presented her. I kind of wish they mentioned her going to school on one of Tony Stark's scholarships, right? That would have been cool tie-in as well. They didn't really talk about how much she loved Tony Stark, because she's a big fan, in the comics at least. She's a fan of Tony Stark and Iron Man. Like, Iron Man's her favorite superhero, and that's how she came across, wanting to create the suit and inspired to make a suit like that. Her suit in this film, the design, I was not a huge fan of. It felt too action figure-y, too Power Ranger-y, too clean, and maybe they'll change it in the future. I mean, they kept changing Iron Man's suit to make it look cooler and different. I think mostly just to sell new toys. Wow. Either way, hopefully they change it, make it look better. I hope they're not too worried about making it look too similar to Iron Man. It does in the comics look similar, just there's a color change and there's a little bit of softness in the corners, right? It's rounded off corners. And of course, the heart, you actually see a heart. Here, it was more like a wide V, and hopefully they fix that as well because I still want it to be comics accurate, right? Even though a lot of times it looks silly when things are comics accurate, if you present it well, it's cool. Like Namor's winged feet, he can fly with just tiny wings on his feet. He can carry up all his weight. If anyone else presented that, it'd probably look ridiculous. Ryan Coogler was able to bring in fear, intensity, and this eeriness when Namor came up from the water, and especially with the music composed by Ludwig Göransson, present that eeriness and fear that he can bring into you because he cannot be messed with. And you weren't laughing then. I actually, the second time watching the film, I sat next to these people that were laughing at almost anything. I feel like they were the people that just were trying to look for an issue and just laugh at it. And they laughed when you first saw his feet. But once he started really messing things up, they were quiet. I feel like I'm going all over the place with the spoiler stuff, but I feel like I didn't write enough notes for it. My thing with this film, I'll say, aside from it being too long and some things needing to be cut, some actors not getting enough time that I felt they should have for the story, it felt like it felt like maybe there were too many elements in this film that they were trying to present at once. I think it was important for Ryan Coogler to do them. Maybe he felt they were very important to him. Presenting Ironheart, who is a black character. Presenting Namor being a actor of color. And I trust him to do representation well. Out of all the directors that have been chosen for these films. And he did, so I'm glad he did. I think it's a phenomenal action and superhero film. But I could see, the flaws in it as a film critic. And that's why I'm not going to give it a rating, because my rating changed between both viewings, and then it changed again today. And it's probably going to change in the future. Actually, I feel like I'm going to appreciate it more as time goes on. Now with the ending, or the mid-credit scene. T'Challa and Nakia had a child named T'Challa. Shuri did not know this, so Nakia presents him to her. His Haitian name is Toussaint, or Toussaint. For those who do not know, Toussaint was the name of the Haitian general who fought against the French for their liberation, who helped liberate Haiti from the French, which I thought was a really cool tie back into France claiming to be innocent, while also going into the theme of Haiti, or not Haiti, but people protecting their own against other outside forces that are just choosing to exploit and use these people and take their resources, right? And with that, giving the message to those people to rely on what you have to create your own resources so you don't have to take from other people, right? Nakia, she was helping the Haitians find their own resources, create their own resources from what they were already given. People many times feel that they're dealt a bad hand, but it's not a matter of what resources you have, but it's how resourceful can you be. Now, speaking with that, with Namor, a reason I appreciated Namor, people said that both Namor and Shuri were fueled off of revenge. And I think Namor had a more logical viewpoint and more logical motivations, more noble motivations as to why he was doing what he was doing. Shuri, strictly revenge. I need to kill Namor. Namor was doing what he can to preserve, to protect, to save the culture and the resources of its people, of indigenous people, and how important it is to protect that from colonizers and people that just want more. People that just want more power, more land, more things to make them rule over other areas, right? Because of this ego thing that we have. And so he saw this, if if outside forces discovered vibranium in the oceans, they would continue digging. It's already an issue with them digging oil, and I'm sure they probably would have presented kind of that if they were given the opportunity and given the time, because again, this is a long film. Just imagine this resource that is on the land, or it's underwater, but the area that is Talocan, it is their resource. And if these people discovered it and came into their kingdom, that's a threat. And no one wants to see that, right? People taking what is not theirs. So I saw Namor's viewpoint made sense. It's similar to Killmonger. It's just that Namor came about it the wrong way by wanting to wipe out all land dwellers, take out everyone on land. Wakanda more so protected just what is theirs, not necessarily wanting to interfere with outside forces, right, or outside conflicts, but be able to give their input, do what they can to help, but also making sure no one came into their land, because they're very powerful, and if you came at them, you'd have to really watch your back. Namor kind of could have learned from that in a way, and Shuri could have learned how to better manage her emotions. Eventually she does. She mourns in a healthy manner. She accepts the traditions of her people because she sees the ancestral plane and she says, "Oh, this is real." Which I like the presentation of Killmonger in that scene when he was, and they did it well to where it didn't feel like we're just going to bring someone who we can still shoot with, right? There's a reason it was Killmonger and not T'Challa or Shuri's mother or her father. She was filled with such rage, and that is what Killmonger wanted, to use that rage as fuel to wipe out anyone that hurt his people or people that look like him. Overall, Black Panther Wakanda Forever is a fabulous film. I'm going to watch it again later. I've already seen it twice. I'm going to give it some time to rest and settle in my mind. A film I recommend you watching. I watched Black Panther, the 2018 Black Panther, prior to watching it the first time, and it hit so much harder. The first one, I will say, I believe is has a better linear story, but this one does. But Wakanda Forever does raise the stakes and raise the ambitions. Is a very ambitious film and raises the action, and I do appreciate that about sequels. But it's also difficult to outdo the original, right? That lays the blueprint, right, and lays the platform for all films that follow to work off of. Anyway, I wonder what you guys thought about it. I enjoyed it. Take care of each other. Check up on one another. Check up on yourself. And remember, potential has no limit.